Welcome back, dear friends, to this course on carbon footprint calculator. And we would be having a look at how the carbon footprint calculator appears to be. When you design a carbon footprint calculator, a typical carbon footprint calculator for a household would look like this. Uh, this is one of the carbon footprint calculator which is available online, and you would see that, and you can also design a similar kind of calculator where you can just put some welcome message, right? And then what is important is you need to put a user interface, like for example you need to ask for the location. Location could be very specific, like the city which you are staying in, or the state which you are residing in, or it could be a wide canvas like a country. For example, this calculator which is shown over here is able to calculate the carbon footprint for a broader location, not a very specific location. So the country is in question is Ethiopia. So it's an African country, and if you enter that country, what exactly is the information which the calculator derives from the data? It derives the information about the emission factor from the electricity which is being supplied to Ethiopia. If you select some other country like United States, so the emission factor would be different, right? So the user interface should first ask for the location, right? For example, in this place, the location is the country. Then it should ask for the period for which the carbon footprint is to be calculated. So generally, we calculate the annual footprint, and I have entered here a location for the year 23-24, right? And when you put such kind of information, the calculator would calculate the footprint for the total year. Okay. uh, why is it important for you to put the duration as a person who programs this? Because generally the consumption data would be monthly or daily, and you need to convert it into annual data. So if you have a monthly data, then you need to multiply it with 12. So the calculator would compute it by taking the monthly data from the user, and from that basis it might help you calculate the annual carbon footprint, right? A carbon footprint calculator designed for a household would also require the information about the people in the household, right? Whether we're a one person, five persons, and all that. So why is this information necessary? I have put here the person one. This is because generally the data is for a family, and if you want to calculate annual carbon footprint of an individual, then you need to divide the number of the people, okay, in the family with the total data which you have, right? Means suppose I am consuming 100 units for a member of 5, then the consumption per individual would be only 20 units, right? Like this. And what you see over here is you need to make a provision of you need to put a blank, right? Blank boxes for the electricity consumed. So using electricity, how much is being consumed? So for me, let us say I have 100 units of electricity being consumed, right? And what is over here is it is the emission factor which is over here, right? You'll understand this in more detail when you do the course. Emission factor is per unit how much is the CO2 being emitted, right? So by multiplying, the calculator would multiply the emission factor with the units consumed, and it would calculate what is the carbon footprint from the electricity consumed. Similarly, one can ask the information on whether the natural gas is being consumed, heating oil is consumed, how much LPG is being consumed, like this, right? And depending on that, the household footprint can be calculated. Uh, we know that another important contributor to the carbon footprint is the uh, mobility carbon footprint. So, because of transport, be it by public transport or be it by individual transport like cars or bikes, the carbon footprint is generated. So, the carbon footprint calculator would ask for the information like how many kilometers the person is traveling, then what vehicle it is traveling, which year the vehicle was manufactured, what is the make of that vehicle, and then the data would have the emission factor for that vehicle, which the calculator will retrieve and use it for calculating the carbon footprint. Okay, or if you don't want to have that much information from the user, you can straight away ask for the of efficiency of that vehicle, and then use the emission factor for that fuel, and you can calculate the carbon footprint. So there are a number of ways of arriving at the carbon footprint from car travel, right? So this example gives you a typical way of asking the user about the car information, about the travel distance traveled, and the vehicle details. Same thing about the bikes. You would find that this app is asking about how many bikes a person has and how many kilometers the person is traveling by a bike. And then again, by choosing a bike, especially what is the CC of that engine, we are assuming here the it's a petrol fueled bike. How much CC of the engine? If you are asking, then the calculator would do the calculations, as would be explained later, and arrive at the carbon footprint of the motorbike. Okay, so the motorbike carbon footprint, for example, if the travel is 100 kilometers with a vehicle of 500 cc, comes to be 0.01 ton of CO2 equivalent, like this. Same thing can be the information for the public transport. So the user is asked as to how many kilometers by bus is traveling, by rail how much kilometers is traveling, whether he's using rail, international rail or tram, whether he's also using hiring a taxi for his travel. So all this information, if you ask the user, using the specific energy consumption for the different modes of transport, the carbon footprint can be calculated even for the public transport. It will be explained again in more detail as we proceed in the course. So here, for in my example, the calculator has computed that the carbon footprint from the bus travel is 0.01 ton, from the rail travel is 0.04 tons, and by the taxi it is 0.01 ton, and the total it comes as 0.06 tons of CO2 equivalent, like this. Okay. If the person is traveling by air flight, okay, and then the calculator would have information like this. That is, what is from where to where the person is traveling, how many times is traveling in a year, and then from the Google Earth, the calculator can take the distance and feed it over here, and then depending upon whether the person is traveling by economic class or by a premium class, one can calculate the carbon footprint from the flight travel also. I will be providing the details as to how this is done in my later lectures. Okay, here you would find that there is something called as tick mark to be done to include radiative forcing. So radiative forcing is basically indirect way of it is indirect contribution of the flights to the global warming. Okay, so one is direct because of the combustion of the fuel, and second is indirectly because of what is known as radiative forcing. So if that is done, then there is a multiplier factor which is inherent into the calculator. It would multiply directly with that, and it will give you the carbon footprint. So I have included here the information in my calculator for a travel from London to Washington, one return trip, and by economic class, and I have included radiative forcing, for which the carbon footprint calculator has generated my footprint from the flight travel as 2.4 tons of CO2 equivalent. So similar way of you can design similar questions in your user interface. And finally, you can give the summarized information in your calculator as like this, where the totaling is done, and finally an individual gets to see how much is his carbon footprint because of the different because of his lifestyle, because of his home, because of his travel modes. Okay, and so on. So this is how a carbon footprint calculator would be has to ask for the information, and this is a preliminary calculator. We need to have a more detailed kind of calculators if it has to be an institutional framework. Okay, but nevertheless, you can also design this. As you proceed in this course, you'll understand that designing this kind of calculator is very easy.